I want to just real quickly. I got reminded why I love the Army Navy game so quickly on Saturday. It's something that's different. People are polite. They're nice. It's patriotic. You just don't see it anymore in America. And I was so glad. It was weird. Like Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, was there, Governor Youngkin of Virginia, but everybody was nice to each other, in a good mood. And I was like, you know what? This is the perfect thing. The teams are respectful to each other. Tim, I just don't think we see enough of this in the media.
Well, no, because this is what they're always what do they always say? We can't normalize Trump. We can't have normal politics. And it's funny because they used to be the ones who are like, why can't we have civility? They haven't said that in about 9 years.
Right.
And so, yes, the big controversy was CBS, I guess, during the broadcast put him on for about 4 seconds, Clay Travis said. So,
you know what? It's funny you say that because I was at the game, obviously not watching it on TV. And Julie Gunlock, I don't know if you guys talked about this in WMAL this morning, but I was told, my mom was watching the game and she goes, I know you said Trump was there, but I only saw him one time.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what Tim was saying. They don't want to normalize this. Also, the crowd went wild for him.
Oh, my God. When his motorcade came by, I put this up on Twitter, by the way, if you want to go see it. People, all of a sudden, you could tell the motorcycles and he coming in. People were going nuts. And I don't think that they want you to show you that.
Yeah, we actually interviewed our board operator on the radio this morning because he was at the game. And I'm telling you, he said it was, the stadium.
Michael Shelton?
Michael Shelton, that's right. Yes, you too have been a host at WMAL on O'Connor and Company. So Michael was there. He said, the rafters were shaking. He said there was so much excitement about President Trump. And I will say also, Wes Moore, you mentioned him. He was there. There's a picture of him on Twitter shaking hands with President Trump, grinning ear to ear, so excited to meet President Trump. I'm sorry. I thought Trump was going to be a tyrant. I thought that he was going to be a dictator. I thought that he was a Nazi. He is part of this party that uses those words towards President Trump. And now, we're all supposed to forget that? I will also say this about Wes Moore. Were there any other Democrats? It is so interesting to me that so few Democrats were at that Army-Navy game. And it is because it is this incredible patriotic spectacle. And that makes Democrats uncomfortable.
Wow. Rob Bluey, it's funny. I didn't see any until Tim Graham brought it up. Like I said, my mom yesterday said to me, gosh, I think Trump was there, but I barely saw him. I don't think anyone in the media picked this up.
It's interesting, Sean, because in some respects, it seemed like this particular Army-Navy game was more relevant and consequential simply because of everything else that was going on. Daniel Penny having a seat in the box. Obviously, Pete Hegseth was there, and his confirmation is somewhat under scrutiny right now. You obviously had, as you said, both of the Republican leaders of the House and Senate, and so in many respects, there was just so much attention about the guests who were there, in addition to the football teams, and obviously we want to celebrate them and the tremendous accomplishments of the Army and Navy team. But yes, and it's surprising, as Tim pointed out, that they didn't focus more on some of the individuals who made the trek to the field there in Landover, Maryland. But it's not surprising. I do think, as Julie pointed out, there are so few elected Democrats in the country who want to be associated with Donald Trump. There's also those in the news media who will do everything they can, I think, to keep their distance from him. And just look at the treatment that John Fetterman, the senator
from
Pennsylvania,
Rob, the funny thing about this is I wasn't paying attention, but apparently at one point during the event, the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, went down in the field, and let's just say he wasn't widely received. And I don't think that CBS wants to show that contrast.
Of course they don't. Lloyd Austin has been one of the most controversial secretaries of defense, not because of anything he's done necessarily in war fighting, because of the politics that he's brought to the Department of Defense. And I'm speaking specifically about the abortion memo that became such a flashpoint with Senator Tommy Tuberville, a former college football coach, we should add. And then obviously all of the other political things when it comes to the woke policies of DEI, transgender. You can just go down the list. It's one of the reasons why Congress voted last week in the Senate will consider this week a measure that would ban the military from allowing youth to get transgender surgeries through TRICARE.
Sean, if I can just answer, you know who else went down on the field? Ron DeSantis, and he was flooded with cadets and players that were thrilled to see him down there. So that's another interesting contrast.
Yeah, it's weird how, like, I mean, this is Tim's wheelhouse, but I literally, this is the point that I sometimes bring to with respect to the media. It's not just what they tell you, it's what they don't. And it's these moments where you're like, they would, if Donald Trump had been booed, they would have covered it all day long.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to argue that the media didn't tell you he was there with Hegseth or whatever. They did that, but this is the way they do it. They're like, President Trump came to the Army-Navy game with his embattled, controversial Pete Hegseth. You know, that's the way they do it. And then, yes, the CBS Evening News, so the weekend news was basically like, and he came with Daniel Penny, who was acquitted of a fatal chokehold.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so they covered it, but what they didn't do it during the game while it was happening on CBS on the sportscast. And Nicole Killian mentioned it in passing. Oh, he acknowledged the cheering crowd. That's like 8 words.
Yeah.
Well, to Tim's point, you know, the only reason that Pete Hegseth is embattled is because the news media has trotted out these anonymous sources, which we've debunked, by the way, at the Daily Signal, and so many other outlets have looked into these charges, and they're found that there's nothing true to them. So yes, I have no doubt they've since moved on, it seems, from Hegseth. Now they're focusing on Tulsi and RFK Jr. But that's something that is worth pointing out, Sean, because you know it's the irresponsible behavior of so many of these journalists and what they're doing to try to tarnish the reputation of these nominees, who they just let the Democrat nominees have a free pass all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the contrast. All right, I want to move from CBS to ABC. I got to be honest with you. When this thing broke, I was like clicking, like, is this a joke? Is this The Onion? ABC News settled a lawsuit with Donald Trump. Now, you remember George Stephanopoulos, the This Week /GMA host, who also was Bill Clinton's spokesman, lied about the charges that Donald Trump was facing, right? I think he said what, Tim, you probably knows, he was convicted of
Liable for rape. Liable for rape.
Right, which was not the case, right? So the Trump team sued them. They settled for over $15 million. Now, of course, Trump's not going to take the money. So he said, okay, you have to make a donation of that amount to my presidential library, which is kind of odd considering that, you know, George Stephanopoulos got caught giving donations to Bill Clinton's foundation. Now he has to make it to Trump's library. But they also had to sign a public apology admitting that they were wrong and they lied. And I just think, I mean, just Tim Graham, this is what you guys do at the Media Research Center. Talk to me about how consequential you think this lawsuit is.
Well, usually what's funny is they're usually going to say that Trump's lawsuits are never going to succeed. That's the first thing, is that they're just like, well, these are nuisance lawsuits. They're meant to have a chilling effect. They're part of an authoritarian playbook, et cetera. So yes, I agree with you. They settled with Trump in a way that we haven't seen except for like Nicholas Sandmann. And of course, he was not a public figure. So this was something else. But I think, you know, obviously the deductions from people on social media was, well, George Stephanopoulos doesn't want you to see his emails.
Wait. So do you buy that?
Well, look, the whole thing is hilarious because it's like George Stephanopoulos, the bimbo eruption specialist, who told everybody not to pay attention to Juanita Broderick's rape allegations against Clinton, is yelling at Nancy Mace that Trump was liable for rape. I mean, that should have been, much more controversial at the time. Now, we should note, George Stephanopoulos did not mention this lawsuit in his show. He hosted the show on Sunday. It was not brought up. That should have been part of the condition. He has to say it on his show. So first
CBS doesn't tell you that Donald Trump's at a game, and now ABC doesn't tell you they settled for $15 million with Donald Trump and made a public apology.
Sean, you talked about the consequences of this, and I will say 2 things. Number one, it's significant because Trump was able to obviously emerge victorious with his settlement. Secondly, I think, and this is something that we'll have to wait and see, will this embolden not only Trump, but other conservatives and Republicans to take a more direct and confrontational approach?
Yes.
Yeah, and
That's
I also would like to know if there are going to be additional lawsuits, because The View, they have to do a legal note every other day. Okay,
it's actually, Julie, isn't that a hostage video what Sonny Hostin does? It's almost like they pause and they're like, Sonny, would you like to read your hostage video about how you?
I mean, you really want to like rescue her at that moment, because she does look like a gun is to her head. But this is also true of MSNBC. I mean, this kind of language we see constantly on these networks. So I am curious if Trump might have additional lawsuits.
Oh, but wait, just so you guys know, I found this out this morning from the folks at the morning meeting that I do every morning. Like, CNN is also being sued. They've already deposed
Right.
Jake Tapper and others. And for people to understand kind of the context of what Tim was saying, when you have these lawsuits happen, there's discovery, and they say, okay, hand over all your emails, all your texts, and it goes both ways, which is why sometimes it's scary when you're involved in these lawsuits, because you do that. And then secondly, because of this prior Supreme Court ruling, the New York Times case, there's a very high bar for public figures. So you have to prove that there was malice and intent. And I think that this goes to the point of this case. They knew in those emails that somewhere George Stephanopoulos said, yeah, he's a jerk, he's guilty. Right. And that was going to come out, and that would have proved. So they'd rather settle for 15 than have emails come out to show how biased they are and how much they hate Trump. I think that, to me, now, I got to believe that there's no reason they would have settled if they didn't have something that they knew that was going to come out.
Well, let me just mention, Sean, we have done a lot of stories. Nick Fondacaro here at Newsbusters has done a series of stories on this CNN defamation lawsuit. And one of the reasons that's going to succeed, they're going to trial here in January. We're sending Nick down to Florida to cover it. Is that you already get this in the discovery that the CNN reporter, the subject of this lawsuit or the plaintiff, he clearly said this guy's a jerk. He's a black market. He's rescuing people from Afghanistan for money. He smeared
Explain
him
the
in
case,
the
though,
email.
Tim. Tell us just what's the basis of this case.
Well, Zach Young was somebody who was getting people out of Afghanistan after the botched withdrawal for money. But CNN did a jerk story on Tapper's show saying he used the words black market. Black market implies criminal activity. That's where the whole lawsuit starts. And then they go from there. It has the potential to be as significant as the Dominion suit against Fox News. This could be a big money reward. It could make $15 million to Trump's foundation look tiny. So that's why we're watching it.
I remember years ago when Trump was first elected, and all the never Trumpers and people on the left would make fun of that line, but he fights. His fight might actually change the media for the good. We might see some changes in the corporate media because of this. Him fighting, this is exactly what he says all the time. What others say about him is he's fighting for the rest of us. It's not just for him. This could have really positive effects on the media, and that's a good thing. You saw Peggy Noonan and Leslie Stahl this last week talking about, oh gosh, I just don't understand why the corporate media is failing. It's such a mystery, and I think, well, they've contributed to it certainly, but I mean, it's because no one has fought back against these.
That's Julie, you're putting your finger on that. This is so important to understand. Like, look, I've been involved in a bunch of things, and the lawyers will tell you, Sean, this is going to cost a ton of money. You're going to go through discovery, and you're a public figure, so you got to be careful. And so you have to go, God, but I want to clear my name. I don't want people thinking I'm a jerk for this reason or that reason falsely. But you're absolutely right, Julie Gunlock, that this is going to change the landscape, because people are going to say, see, you can fight and win.
That's right.
Absolutely, Sean. That is so true. And number one, we've seen that successfully employed not only by Trump, but some of the people around him going back 8 years now. I mean, there has been in years past, you think about instances where the media put a target on a particular Republican's back, and within a week, that person was resigned from their office and never heard from again, right? And now you have a situation like with Pete Hegseth, where they came after him with a whole bunch of scandalous accusations that proved to be false. And what did he do? He went on Megyn Kelly's show and a bunch of other shows to clear his name. And who knows? Maybe he'll go after the New Yorker and Jane Mayer and others like that for what they've done to him. The other thing here, and Sean, you referenced this earlier, there is that famous Supreme Court case, and there have been people like Justice Clarence Thomas who've wanted to revisit that New York Times v. Sullivan case and re-examine libel laws in this country. Maybe we are giving too much deference, to journalists and media companies, but that's obviously a further path down the road. Would need a case to come before the Supreme Court for that to come up. But there are some in the conservative movement who want to revisit it.
Tim Graham, tell me if I'm being petty or not on this. I flip around every morning to see what topics are being covered and how they're being covered. And I went through CNN. Brian Stetler there over at CNN was sort of saying that part of the reason that maybe the ABC settled is because they didn't want to start this new Trump administration in the middle of a lawsuit and get on the bad side, which I think is ridiculous. Why? How come when they have Republicans on, they say, so-and-so said this without evidence, but when Brian says it on CNN without evidence, it's okay?
Pretty much every time somebody uses the words without evidence, there's two things that you can say. One, let's guess there's a lot of evidence. But we want to ask the question, have you looked for any evidence? Because a lot of times they're just like, well, there's no evidence of that. Well, did you look into it? No, I don't have to. I can just state for the record, this is like saying there's no evidence there's a Hunter Biden laptop. They say things that just sound ridiculous on their face. So yes, I don't buy for a second the idea that ABC needs to be nice to Trump now that he's going to be president. Nobody should buy that. And the funniest thing is, yes, everybody can just watch these people on television or on their social media to know, do these guys have a malignant intent in going after Trump? Everybody can see that. Everybody knows it. This is probably why they have to settle, because it's obvious to everyone that they're on a jihad.
Rob Bluey, check this out. There is a poll. We had our friends from Signal on Friday with this exclusive polling. Brent Buchanan shared with me some additional information this morning that I thought was so fascinating. It shows how you voted depending on where you get your news. So if you primarily got your news from cable, 48% of people vote for Harris, 51% Trump, 3% plus for Trump. If you are a national television person, that's where you get your news from, your ABC, CBS's, 69 Harris, 30 Trump. She won that by almost 40 points. So that tells you something. If you're getting your information from ABC, NBC, Nightly News, CBS, you voted for her. Local television, she still won 56-43. Here's where it gets fun. If you get your news and information from YouTube, 41% voted for Harris, 55 voted for Trump, a 14% delta in favor of Donald Trump. But it gets better yet. If you get your information from streaming platforms, 35% for Harris, 61 for Trump. This is the future. By the way, the newspaper legacy, folks, if you go outside and pick up the New York Times or the Des Moines Register, 73% voted for Harris, 25 for Trump. So legacy people, your vote, those are the people voting. If you get your information from X, 28 Harris, 69 for Trump. Talk radio, 29, 69 Trump, almost the same as getting it from X. Facebook, 38 Harris, 60 Trump. I thought that was fascinating. Websites in general, 46 Harris, 52 Trump. Here's the last one. TikTok. If you primarily get your news from TikTok, 56% for Harris, 14% for Trump. That's a delta of 14%. And remember, most of the people on TikTok are like 8. So that tells you what's going on. But here's the funny thing. When I was talking to Brent Buchanan about this, he said, here's the kicker. Biden won TikTok voters by 30%. So she did worse with TikTok than an 80-year-old guy. And she was supposed to be hip and cool. I mean, Rob Bluey, what do these numbers tell you?
Well, Sean, it's fascinating, and I would say that the first reaction I have to some of these numbers is those gatekeepers from those legacy news organizations, whether it be on the national network television or the newspapers that you cited, they want to control everything that you see and hear. The great thing about platforms like YouTube and Facebook streaming, obviously, you have the choice as the consumer to look at all sorts of different information. There's not some journalist behind the scene dictating what's on the front page or what's being broadcast on the evening news. You can go to multiple news sources on YouTube, since many of them are all broadcasting there. To your last point about TikTok, I would suggest that it's probably because Trump played a more active role on TikTok in this campaign, and so maybe he was able to narrow some of that gap. I'm no huge fan of TikTok, and obviously the CCP control of the algorithms of that app, but it just demonstrates the importance for Republicans and conservatives to have an active presence on these platforms is something that I've advocated for a long time, and why we at the Daily Signal have said we are really platform agnostic. We don't care if you get your news through our email newsletter, our website, Facebook, YouTube. We want to be an active presence on all of those platforms because we know to the individual consumer, they'll customize their own news experience in this day and age.
Julie Gunlock, I mean, I get, like, to me, the takeaway there is if you're a legacy person and you're getting it from cable,
learn to code.
Yeah, but here's why I think this is important. They're dying. Streaming, YouTube, X, all of those things, Facebook, that's the future of where it's all going. So if you're Democrats, you got to be worried that all of your main sources are not good for your candidates.
That's right. Look, Democrats, they've atrophied. They don't even know how to deliver a message because they've always relied on a compliant press to do exactly what they want. And now that sort of relationship is at risk here because, look, the American public, and I think people in general, always look for the truth. They want the truth, and they want to grapple with these questions. They want to see other people grapple with these questions. And what you get from the corporate media is the exact same message. There are these viral videos showing news anchors saying the exact same thing. It's sort of been fed to them. We are tired of that. We cannot rely on the truth. And honestly, what happened during COVID, that was such a great awakening for the American public. They saw the lies that were delivered by government officials and then without question just sent out to the public by these media entities that were willing to carry it. I think that what happened during COVID, what happened during the school shutdowns, what happened with George Floyd, these were such incredible moments in American history that have changed the landscape forever. Corporate media is done. We know this. And that is why and it's very interesting what you're seeing, Sean, in these polling numbers. It's really bearing that out.
Tim Graham, the thing that's interesting to me, we talked a moment ago about what doesn't get covered. I look at some of these shows, Megyn Kelly, Dan Bongino, you name it, right? Who do very well on YouTube. In fact, get more viewers than a lot of cable stations. And yet no one covers them, right? And I think this is intentional. Again, this goes back to what Rob Bluey said, which is they want to control what you see, read, and hear in the legacy media. And therefore, they don't even want you to know that these outlets exist.
Well, yeah, they love this idea of being the gatekeepers because they love shutting conservatives out of the gate. They're like, well, we're just going to smear you and you're not allowed to defend yourself. That's gatekeeping. I would say we're headed for something different. I think the word we should use for people like CNN and MSNBC, they're the base keepers. Everything they do is about keeping their audience jonesing on the anti-Trump hate. And so they're going to ignore things that they don't like. But yes, if you can look at the MSNBC reaction to ABC settling with Trump, which they made it sound like George Stephanopoulos is kissing Trump's rings, shoes, and butt. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, but this, there's performance in this. And it makes it fun for us to just go look at these guys today. But yes, obviously people can get around the bias by omission. And we just have to make sure we call it out and say, this is what they're not covering today.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.